Hello, I'm Ismael Ariano, and I will be teaching these courses. This specific course is on physical security. This is one of many modules that cover an abundance of information as it pertains to performing your physical security audit. You will read here about my background as far as just highlights of my certifications and training, and uh, I hope you enjoy this course that I put together for you. In this module, we'll go over the pedestrian access to a site or to a property. We're going to discuss and demonstrate with reference to the management of pedestrian access, entrances, how the National Fire Protection Act and Americans with Disability Act requirements apply to a lot of changes and recommendations during an audit, signs and crosswalks, reception, safe areas where visitors can wait before entering a property, doors, gates, types of doors and gates leading to and from a property, vulnerability, how you can create and or reduce a vulnerability. Property presentation and the entrance of a property is the most important. It's almost kind of like, as they say, people are impressed with the first thing that they see, or um, first impressions kind of thing. When you look at entrances, there are different type of entrances, but the entrance really is the character of the property. The entrance really gives people notice of what the intent of the business property is. Um, excuse me, I digress. It gives the intent of the property, whether it be a business or for personal use or for recreation. And the entrance is very significant. And so uh, everything that happens at the entrance is what changes the mood or has some implications with reference to how people will behave when they enter the property. So there are different types of entrances. There's the linear, there are paths. When I say linear, there's a where it's a straight line and people just kind of walk through a straight line all the way to a front door. Paths are kind of, they're very casual. Sometimes they're not even concrete or anything. They're beaten down and they lead to an entrance. Open space is kind of like a open area, or maybe a combination of where it has a linear and then it goes into an open space where people tend to congregate in that open space. Restricted spaces, where, like, for instance, it's a linear, it stays or it reduces to where traffic can only go to and from within a specific amount of feet. And then the maze, sometimes you'll see this at cities and or urban areas where they have not necessarily a big maze, but they have a series of walls, and you walk past one wall and then you take a turn and then go through another wall, or maybe they'll use gates or other barriers in order to cause pedestrian access to and traffic to go through these walls until they finally make it to a front door. So now we talked about what the entrances look like. What is it exactly we want our visitors to do when they enter the property? So when you're looking at these vulnerabilities and you're starting to do your assessment and your audit, what is it that the intent of the business, of what is it that the client wants their visitors to do? And so there's a numerous amount of signs or signage that will be helpful or necessary sometimes in order to either meet some type of uh, requirement with city codes or statutes when it comes to, like, for instance, the ADA or the NFPA. Then there's also signs that kind of help divert traffic to, or show pedestrian traffic. It moves them in a direction towards where the event is at. Also, other signs can, display, a location or a map in order to give people understanding of where they're at and where they need to go. Signs are very important. Um, Most times, clients will want a sign that blends and is consistent with the backdrop of the property and it meets the business purpose of the property. So these are things that when you're making recommendations, do the research, look for um, alternatives with reference to what type of signs can be used. Also, consider whatever the local ordinance and laws are, because sometimes signs have to be with certain type of lettering font or a certain height in order to be enforceable, or in order for somebody to say that yeah, those signs are compliant with whatever requirements they have. For instance, NFPA requirements for especially areas that have big events with large populations, assembly point areas in case there's some kind of a fire. But nowadays, as a result of a lot of violent incidents with active shooters, they also use those same type of techniques and strategies with reference to assembly areas for, in instance, a major tragedy or incident may occur, to get everybody in one area so that people can account for loved ones and or employees and managers can account for staff that should be on the property. So now that we covered the entrance and now we covered the signs, and we're kind of giving messages to our visitors, we're showing them where they should be, or where is the authorized or the accepted area for them to congregate. Let's talk about things that are specific to structure and how the client would set up an area that way that they're creating a peaceful and user friendly area. So then that way, one, they can control the traffic back and forth from the property, but they can also make it very comfortable and very accepting for the user. So, the concierge or somebody who's a guide, um, being at the property when visitors, arrive, doesn't necessarily have to be anybody important or specifically purposed just for that. It could be just about anybody that can go out and present themselves and meet with guests and kind of give them direction with reference to where to go and where the signs are, and also give them additional information if they need to, or even if they request for additional assistance. The kiosk, there's kiosks nowadays. um, we're headed into the AI, artificial intelligence, digital age, and I wouldn't put it past where there'll be AI kiosks where they'll talk to somebody and let them know, hey, you're in the wrong area. This is where you need to go, or they can give directions. So stay tuned to that. But a kiosk with a person in it that is in a highly populated, highly visited area is very important, because the kiosk can offer information, guidance, and also be a place where emergencies can be reported. Then we're talking about let's talk about seating. Now, we're like, if you want your guests, and during this, they're coming in through the entrance, they come in through either a linear model or a path, or they come in through some type of maze, and then they arrive. And before they make it into the structure, you want to make it comfortable and accepting for them. Maybe you could put some seats. I recommend that you don't put seats too close to the path or to any type of where they're walking. It's best to have seats or seating away so many feet, so then that way there's a reduction of population in small areas, and also it makes it more comfortable, and people are more inviting to have conversations or do things that maybe may not be accepted inside a structure, like using tobacco products or whatever it may be. So these are things that using cell phones, and it gives them an opportunity to go sit outside, or even before they enter, go onto a device and have a conversation before having to enter a structure or an event. Enclosed structures, this is something that it could be a combination of what they call as a man trap, where um, if you're in a higher security area where the visitor comes in and the door locks behind them and then the door doesn't open until they've been cleared, or it can be very passive where it's no doors and somebody can just walk through and it's a place where they can wait until maybe there's a line and people are being checked, screened, and it gives them a chance to be out of the weather, maybe cool off or warm up, and you know uh, they're able to maybe have short conversations or get some direction before they enter into the main structure. Enclosures are popular, and they don't necessarily have to be completely enclosed. They can just be covered with gates or fencing, and just like I said, an area like a buffer area where people can kind of stop there and meet and gather information, receive direction, and then go from there with reference to, continuing with their visit to the property. So these are ideas with reference to some things that you would recommend when you do your audit. Every recommendation is unique to the audit, to the property that you're doing it, because every property is unique. So we wouldn't offer advice that is not relevant to the property. Like for instance, you have an area where uh, they don't have fencing, so maybe some things you would not offer as a recommendation because there's plenty of open space. So you always have to keep in mind your mitigations. Ultimately, what you're trying to do and show the client is that um, areas or opportunities when people are accessing their property that can be made safer or is acknowledged as a safe area all by itself as a result of the natural territoriality, the natural way that the structure and the landscaping is set up. So these are things to think about when you're making your audit recommendations and observations. So we talked about entrances, we talked about different types of paths and linear walkways and open areas, and we talked about um you know with reference to you know the different types of meeting areas and seating and reception. Now we're talking about doors and gates. um you make a recommendation for a door and a gate, you always have to consider all the safety concerns. What's the business purpose of that property? Like for instance, are you going to put doors and gates in a place where there's a requirement that they, like for instance, in accordance with the National Fire Protection Act, that they have to evacuate from that structure or building so many 100 feet, and the property line is only 50 feet from the street. So then maybe a gate and a door, um, it may not be conducive with the way the property is set up. Also, having not enough stuff, like not recommending a gate or a door, or putting a door um, that's not, that you can't see through the door or the gate in order to see on the other side. That that can be a liability concern. Other things to look at is the American with Disabilities Act with reference to wheelchair access, and can people with wheelchairs enter that place, and is it required? Like, are they a business or an organization, like for instance, that are required by law to have ADA access? Now, here in the United States, that law specific is the United States. Yeah, mostly any business that has a new structure built within a certain period of years has to have certain compliances. or have been modified. But you can find places that have been either wavered because they're historical sites, or they've modified it to where they've created other entrances. So when you're doing your mitigations, you have to do your homework with reference to compliance. And when you're looking at doors and gates, is that you have to question, is that door or gate going to make things better or worse? So when you're giving your advice and interacting with your client, you have to talk about that. With They may want a gate, but maybe a gate's not, you know, recommended as a result of, these past things we just recently spoke about. So let's move on to the next section. And as you're thinking about your audit and when you're looking at some of these tangibles and intangibles and things that need to be or could be changed, you know um, look at examples of incidents that were like serious incidents where people, I always look at the extreme, where people have died as a result of a door being there, or a gate being placed there. Look at all your mitigations and then use that historical information and the best practices in order to deliver good, solid, up to date information to your client. So, in finality, this is a very short module as a result of being kind of like a small portion of a larger area that's covered with reference to your physical security audit. Um, the big, the big picture on this whole thing, specifically when it comes to pedestrian access, is your vulnerabilities and really working with your client, drawing maps, working with architects, gathering data, figuring out the traffic in the community, and really doing your homework in order to put a real perspective with reference to known and unknown threats, known and unknown mitigations, and then figuring out what are the best things to do with reference to any kind of changes or new implementations that the client wants to do. Um, I can give you a lot of examples where, especially recently, where in the areas that I've been, where they've constructed a brand new elementary school, and then when you look at the parking schematic and the map for the parking, and you could figure out that right away that there's going to be incidents as a result of road raging, as a result of bad parking plans, and where it appears that the school teachers dictated exactly how they wanted the parking lot to look like versus looking at it at a different standpoint as a security expert, and really kind of explaining, how the flow of traffic should go, or even bringing in a law enforcement person that works traffic details that actually investigates traffic crashes, making recommendations with reference to how where the traffic is going to flow, and so on and so forth. Same thing with pedestrian access. You want to have a map and you want to create those those designs, so then that way the infrastructure causes the people to behave in a certain way. It puts them in a situation where they walk in certain directions, that they as soon as they get out of a vehicle or they're walking across the street, that they see certain signs, and everything is very easily identifiable to somebody with different learning capabilities. People with that are may not have the ability of sight, or not be able to hear, that they would be able to walk onto that property and understand the minimums when the reference where the accesses are and where the entrances are and where they should and shouldn't be. And so that plan uh, and those vulnerabilities are things that you have to really uh, nail it down. You have to get to the client where they understand what the basics are, with reference to how a bad plan, a bad, like a parking plan, or a bad entrance plan uh, for a property may affect or cause an influx of incidents, to include, even violent incidents where people run into each other without knowingly doing it because the doors are open a certain way, or because the entrance is so linear that everybody's having to run into each other. These are all common sense things that people don't think about until it's too late. So do your homework, do your research, um, get those experts and gather that information, so then that way you can give your client some serious options, so then that they when they look into the future, either when they do a new construction or they're doing any kind of modifications or implementations, that they know that they have the right kind of information in order to make their property more appealing, acceptable, usable to their visitors, versus having situations, like I said, that the structure and the infrastructure causes conflict, and people not to behave according to what the expectations are. First question is, how does the National Fire Protection Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act affect the pedestrian entrances? In your country, you may not have this law, but you may have a law that is applicable or similar to the same laws that they have here in the United States. Second question, what signs help with pedestrian access? Third question, what is the most common type of access? Now we're talking about access that's leading to a property. What type is the most common? Well, thank you for watching this module. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact me in the email below. I think that this is a great opportunity for you to understand and perform your self audit. This is only one module of many in a series of modules that will cover on performing your self audits when it comes to physical security, and on what we're covering is private property, but it does fall within the categories of a physical security level 3, under the federal standards for the Department of Homeland Security, uh, ISC, the ISC, the committee that makes recommendations for physical security of government buildings.